It's taken the Freo coach a while just to work out where to use Jackson. Finally, he's in the right spot, Diggers.
I would argue that they have 7 or 8 A graders. Boy, oh boy, their percentage says they are a very, very bad football side at the moment.
I'm loving this, Diggers. I know you're a North Melbourne man, but I'm starting to get concerned that you might be turning purple. There's so much love in the room. Well, g'day, I'm Mark Stevens. I'm at Zero Hangar HQ for another episode of the Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here. Once again, like every week, I'll be joined by Digby Beacham, the legendary journo from over in WA. Let's bring it on. Well, g'day, Diggers. How's your week been over in Perth?
Oh, it's been good, Stevo. It's been a big week. A lot of fanfare surrounding the Fremantle performance against Hawthorn last Thursday, and that's understandable given it was billed as a bit of a showdown. And I think Fremantle fans are now thinking about September, and I'm not talking early September. I'm talking deep, deep, deep into September.
Are they getting ahead of themselves, Diggers, down there in Freo?
Oh, no, I don't think they're getting ahead of themselves, but they're up and about, and understandably so. They've won 8 in a row. They get Essendon this week, so you'd like to think that they're now going to equal the club's games winning streak of 9 wins, which is quite phenomenal given there were some question marks in the wake of that loss down in Geelong earlier in the season. But they're up and about. They are feeling very, very good about themselves, the Fremantle fans.
Yeah, well, we'll start with maybe Essendon for something a bit different. It's a tiny danger game, only because they're playing at the G. You don't see Freo there too often, Diggers, and you're talking about records. Freo's Freo. Could there be an upset?
Oh, look, there could. It's a game of football. Anything can happen. But for mine, Steve, I'd rather see Fremantle at the MCG than Marvel. I think the dimensions of the MCG and what we get here at Optus Stadium are virtually identical. We know that this ground here in Western Australia is a bit faster, it's a bit slicker, a bit harder than what you get over there at the G, but these interstate sides, and I talk of certainly West Coast and Fremantle, when they are afforded the opportunity to play at the home of football, they love it.
I reckon it's made for Josh Tracy this week at the G. To people talking up like Wayne Carey, that's a bit of a stretch at the moment, but gee, he's magnificent, and I think he's suited to that big stage, Diggers.
Yeah, he is, and there's a few of them like that. And one thing that we have seen from Fremantle this season, Steve, is when there's been a need for 1 or 2 or 3 of them to stand up and help pull their team over the line, they've been able to do that. We talk about Adelaide in Adelaide, Collingwood in Adelaide, your Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium, Hawthorn. They look dead and buried at stages against the Hawks last Thursday here, Fremantle. But some of their headline acts, and of which they've got many, stood tall and got that team over the line.
Well, Luke Jackson's the number 1 headline act. You can lock him into All-Australian already unless he gets injured. Absolutely flying. Could you mount an argument he's the best player in the country, Diggers?
Oh, he's flying. You're right, Steve. I think he sits 4th in the AFL Coaches Association Awards. He's got 45 votes. Now, the 50 votes in a 3-way tie for first are Butters, Bontempelli and Dacos. It's a pretty good CV that those 3 guys possess, and you can understand why they sit where they do. But Luke Jackson's influence on games at Fremantle, we saw that smother, didn't we, last week? It was phenomenal. His ability to extract the football from the clearance. Like he's effectively a 6'6", 6'7" ruck rover in the old terms, isn't he? He's a marvel. He's kicking goals, and it's now you would think either he or Max Gawn, who's the preeminent man. He's a 9-time All-Australian who gets the nod for the All-Australian first ruck, I suppose. But I don't think you could lose with either of them. They're both absolute stars.
Well, I think the Melbourne coach Stephen King's having an impact on that. He's playing Max forward for a lot of the games. Yeah. So I think it's Jackson's. And it's taken the Freo coach a while just to work out where to use Jackson. Finally, he's in the right spot, Diggers.
Yeah, and I think as we've touched on, Stevo, he is the beneficiary of the new ruck rules and the ball being thrown up rather than that just incessant wrangling and basically mauling of each other. He's an athlete, a pure athlete who's got a great sense of the football and where it is, and he hunts it, and he's so very clean beneath his knees. But he's in rare nick. Both he and Max Gawn are averaging just under a goal a game. I think Max is averaging in excess of 20-odd possessions. He's had a wonderful year again, Max Gawn, but I just like the way that Luke Jackson complements this Fremantle running division.
Well, let's continue the love-in with Freo. You're talking about Jackson. There's so many others. Do they have more A-graders than anyone else in the competition? We can reel them off. I mean, you're talking about Bolton as well.
Yeah, I would argue that they have 7 or 8 A graders, and there's only one other club in my mind, Stevo, that is anywhere near that and perhaps at that level, and that's Brisbane. Like when you look at Fremantle, you look at Jackson, Bolton, Tracy, Sarong, Pearce, Clark, Brayshaw, Young. And if he isn't already, I would argue that Murphy Reid is fast becoming one.
Yeah, I think
So
you're being a
there's-
bit generous there. I think there's a couple of guys not quite there, Diggers, but they're close. I don't think Brayshaw's an A grader. He's a B plus. Clark probably a B plus, but they're in the mix, aren't they? Sarong probably an A, but needs to
Sarong's-
do more.
Yeah, look, I might be being generous. I've got the purple glasses on over here. But then you look at Brisbane, and I wrote down Dunkley, McCluggage, Ashcroft, Will Variety, Neil, Zorko, Rayner, Andrews, Bailey, and if Jordan Clark's one, I'd argue that Darcy Wilmot's one. So, but both clubs are just littered with talent, and I dare say they're going to meet later in the year. We get to see them obviously up at the Gabba soon, but I dare say they'll be crossing paths in September.
Yeah, I'm with you, Diggers, there. It's a powerhouse list. There's no excuses for Longmuir, to be honest. He's been given a perfect list, great list management. Other clubs would be envious of that, looking at certainly what's happening down at the Blues and how they're trying to reshape what they're doing. Let's move on to West Coast. Again, not as positive, of course. The key defensive stocks. I mean, Harry Edwards, the latest with the concussion, that's a sad story.
Yeah, it is, and he's now in real trouble, unfortunately. Young Harry, it was quite sad to see him get his opportunity back at AFL level and then get concussed again early in that game against Melbourne on Sunday at Marvel Stadium. That's his 3rd concussion this year. So we're now in that space, aren't we, where we're genuinely worried for his well-being, and as we know, there's a lot of life to lead and live after your AFL career. So a decision needs to be made on Harry. Now, one thing Andrew McQualter did say post-match on the weekend is that he was in good spirits and he seemed, up and about, as well as you can be when you are concussed. So that's encouraging. But with no Harry Edwards in that back half, Stevo, look, Tyler Young, Sandy Brock, they have tried to address their deficiencies. They know they've got a shortcoming down there, the West Coast list management team. But we've lost, if you're a West Coast fan, you go, well, we've lost McGovern, we've lost Barris, and now you're going to lose, you would think, Harry Edwards. Question marks over Young and question marks over Brock and whether they're made of the right stuff to be playing in those roles and having the responsibility that you need. I think it's time that they have a look at Rhett Bazzo. I'm a bit of a fan of Rhett Bazzo. He's in good nick at the waffle level. Now, is he a bit of a tweener? He's probably not that big bopper, but I think he can strengthen them up behind the ball. And in fairness, though, you could have Stephen Silvani and Matthew Scarlett down there at the moment. The way that the ball's going in, it doesn't matter who's down there. They are leaking a lot of goals.
Would you try Shanahan down there for a while just to settle things down?
Well,
you've got to get your defence right
would.
if you're any chance in this competition, Diggers. I think McQualter now, number one aim, get Shanahan into the back line for support. You can always kick goals if you're getting it in there, but you must defend, otherwise you're no chance.
Yeah, that's right, Stevo, and that's the other option. But the flip side of that is you put Joe back behind the ball, and I think he's fine down there, and he could well forge a career as a key defensive player. But I like him forward of the ball. But the issue there is, for mine, is then that leaves young Cooper Duff Titler as your focal point alongside Jake Waterman. He's 9 games in. He probably needs a break. You don't want to burn him out. He's a big, young, raw kid who's got uploads, like a heap of potential. The upside's enormous for young Cooper. But I think there's going to come a stage in the next 2 to 3 weeks where he has a spell or just has a week off football. So this is the issue. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul if you're Andrew McQualter. And boy, oh boy, their percentage says they are a very, very bad football side at the moment.
So is it unfair to label them the worst in the competition? I've been watching them in recent weeks. You'd have to say yes, Diggers, really. I mean, Carlton, even though they've only won the one game, are going better. Essendon looked dangerous and competed well against GWS, and the Tigers had a win against West Coast.
Yeah. Correct, only a couple of weeks ago, Steve. I think it's fair, and as much as the West Coast fans will rail against that, if you had a genuine debate about where West Coast sit, I think their percentage is the worst in the competition at the moment. you're right. Richmond beat them 2 weeks ago. And Richmond, I thought, were okay again against Adelaide. They've been competitive in games this year. Carlton's just coming off a pretty creditable performance against Brisbane, the dual back-to-back premiers. And Essendon have probably shown some signs of late as well. Right here, right now, West Coast are 18th in terms of the pecking order for mine.
And the Giants, for mine, look cherry ripe just to go over to Perth and get it done. They're underachieving, the Giants. They look really good on paper, but paper doesn't mean a lot. You know what you do with paper at times, Diggers. So can they get it done over there, the Giants? I think they'll win by 8 goals plus against the Eagles. Sorry to be morbid about that.
No. That's okay. No, look, that's fine. It's your opinion. You're allowed to, impress that upon others. And that's what it is. It's an opinions game, but I'm with you. I think the Giants get a really good look. They had to work hard to get over the top of the Bombers on the weekend just gone, but they have had a good record against West Coast over here. They find a lot of the football that we know. And if we can see Jesse Hogan hopefully come back into the mix and rediscover some of that best form, it's not a bad time to be a key forward coming up against West Coast.
Well, that's the 2 Perth teams done and dissected. We'll take a break. We'll be back with one new segment and a real powerhouse finish.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about.
What are you really gambling with?
Well, Diggers, I just wanted to ask you about the coaching situation. Obviously, there's a job now going at Carlton. Adam Simpson, you know him well. He's from the outer wing over there in Perth. How do you like his chances?
Oh, look, you might know the lay of the land better over there, Steve. Look, he's got premiership credentials, hasn't he? And there's a few coaches that are on the shelf and being spoken about. Unfortunately for Michael, it was inevitable. I don't think we thought it was going to happen this week, but he moves on, and now the race for the next man at Icon Park starts. So who do you get? Look, there's always this talk, isn't there, Steve, about getting those who have, coached before, be it a Hinkley, a Buckley, a Longmire, a Simpson, and I get that. But I've been quite staunch on this for a long period of time now. If you backtrack through history and recent history, and you can work on that however you like, but in the past quarter of a century, there's been 2 recycled coaches, by my reckoning, that have won flags. Lee Matthews at Brisbane back in the early 2000s, and what a side he had to work with, but notwithstanding that, 4 grand finals in a row, so a wonderful achievement from Lethal. And the other one is Mick Malthouse at Collingwood back in 2010. Post-Mick's success there in 2010, and we know that he had success over here with West Coast, they've all been first-time coaches who have won flags. So I think that's something that the Blues subcommittee, coaching subcommittee, whoever settles on their next appointment needs to consider, because sometimes fresh is best, and certainly it looks that way for mine.
Fresh is best sounds like a supermarket slogan, Diggers, but I think you're onto something there. So you're saying that Simo's no chance?
Oh, look, if Adam wants to walk back into the fire, I'm sure that he'd be considered. He didn't finish in a blaze of glory over here. The standards at West Coast dropped away dramatically, and Andrew McQualter's inherited a list which, in the eyes of many is one of the worst in the competition. So I wouldn't think that's a resounding yes for the prospects of Adam Simpson, but maybe the fact that he's had an opportunity, he's worked at a big interstate club, he understands the pressures that come with coaching, and there are a lot of pressures that are associated when you're linking up with Carlton and their history with coaches. So he has to be a chance. I'm sure John Longmire will be spoken about, well, Ken Hinkley, Nathan Buckley. I'm not sure about what it looks like over there, but if I was to urge Carlton something, I'd urge them to look at some fresh blood. Look what Stephen King's been able to do at Melbourne. He's been a breath of fresh air, hasn't he?
And Ash Hansen, of course, West Coast, the son of the late, great Clark Hansen, who was a legend here as a commentator, but really well rated, Ash Hansen, and well placed. Do you think he's a chance? I mean, not being spoken about a lot, but it was revered at the Dogs. And he's done some good work at Carlton.
Well, and that's the thing is the fact that he's been at Carlton, Stevo, throughout the Michael Voss era. Is that going to work for him, or is it going to work against him? Do they need, again, I'm using the buzzword here, fresh? Do they need some fresh eyes, from fresh ideas from outside the Carlton Football Club. That's something that smarter minds than you and I will work through, I'm sure, but it's going to be a fascinating watch as to who they land with.
Now, speaking of fresh, Diggers, this is a fresh one for us on the outer wing. Diggers' list. Now, I'm going to put you under the pump here. So we're going to rank this. So the best home ground advantage of these powerhouse sides going into the finals. Freo, Sydney and Brisbane. They're all going to be high up. You give me from 3 to 1, starting with the lowest ranking, who has the best home ground advantage going into September?
I would think 3 being the third most influential home ground advantage is Sydney. Now, some will say that's ridiculous given what the Swans have achieved at the SCG, and when that joint starts rocking, they can be very, very formidable. But for mine, Sydney at the SCG, it's a great home ground advantage. We know that the eastern suburbs set there in the harbour city get to the footy and they love their Swans. But I think off what we've seen and what we're about to talk about, Sydney is third for mine, Stevo.
Number 2?
Brisbane, you've been up there when they played some big finals. I dare say you were there back in the early 2000s.
It was a horror show, Diggers.
Known as
the night that
the
Lynch
abattoir, wasn't it?
He did the choke thing on Westy. Remember that one? The dogs choke a hold, which, that wasn't great. That just rubbed it in. We were about 10 goals down at the time. It's impossible up there to win a final, although I do remember Bailey Smith kicking one on the left to win one up there not so long ago.
Yeah, look, it's a formidable venue, and it's a very daunting ground, isn't it? And it gets really noisy there, and but it is, it's a ground which is also perhaps a little bit restricted in its capacity, a bit like the SCG. So, look, I'm leading towards Fremantle, and there'll be people out there saying, "Oh, you're being
so this is number 1."
parochial.
You're saying Freo have got the number 1 advantage over there?
Yeah, I do, Steve. And there's an element of thirst here because the Fremantle fans are still waiting for that maiden premiership. And what you saw there on Thursday night, it was loud, like 54-odd thousand there, so they can get more there. And it's a Thursday night, which isn't a great time over here, 6:10 bounce down. So, but what you do know with the Fremantle fans, they're quite rabid. They love it. And I think you're going to see more and more get to the games. And when they get to September and hopefully host a couple of finals, Optus Stadium is going to be a very, very inhospitable place to play football if you're not wearing purple. And we go all the way back to, I think it was 2013 at Subi Oval when Fremantle played Sydney in that prelim. It was as brutal and a nasty environment and a more daunting environment I can't recall. It was frightening, and they had their way with the Swans on that occasion, Fremantle, as they marched towards a grand final. And I suspect that Fremantle, with the benefit of the purple haze, Wharfie time, Stevo, as it's known over here, they can bounce and bounce hard with what I perceive to be the best home ground advantage in the AFL of those 3 main interstate contenders.
I'm loving this, Diggers. I know you're a North Melbourne man, but I'm starting to get concerned that you might be turning purple. There's so much love in the room for the Dockers. But speaking of love, I'd love to get some money in the wallet for betting-wise this week for TABtouch Real Punters Play here. Give us a couple of betting options for the Western teams.
Okay, well, we'll start with the Fremantle and Essendon game, and I'm taking Hayden Young, Shea Bolton to kick 1 goal each, and also Josh Tracy, who you talked about a little bit earlier this morning, Stevo, having a fat day against the Bombers. Him to kick 2 goals. That's $2.95 with TABtouch. So Hayden Young 1 goal, Shea Bolton 1 goal or more, and Josh Tracy to kick at least 2 majors against the Bombers. $2.95 with TABtouch. Focusing on the game here at Optus Stadium, West Coast and GWS. I'm going to keep it nice and simple here, Stevo. I think GWS win, and I think the game total surpasses 178.5 points. That $2.15 also clearly with TABtouch.
I like it, Diggers. Gamble responsibly, of course. Another great episode of The Outer Wing. A few little different herbs and spices today. Brought to you by TABtouch, of course. Real Punters Play here. We'll see you next week.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.